I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I hate fire the coach radio or fire the coach anything, whether it's Facebook comments, whatever. The initial criticism is, oh, coach needs to go. Coach needs fired. No matter what happens, whether it's the player's complete ineptitude, whatever the case may be, it always falls on the coach that the coach needs fired, that the coach is an idiot and doesn't know anything. It's got to go. I hate it. Hate it, hate it, hate it. I'm also a hypocrite, so here goes. I don't know how Shane Beamer is still the head coach of the South Carolina Gamecocks this morning. I have no idea, legitimately. Other than, and I don't, maybe this is a bigger, his buyout is $28 million. South Carolina blew a 27-point lead on Saturday afternoon. SEC schools were 0-286 when trailing by 27 or more points coming into yesterday, and now that number is 1-286. That shows you how rare the absolute abject failure and collapse for the South Carolina Gamecocks was yesterday against Texas A&M. But it's not just the fact that they blew a 27-point halftime lead. And to just brag for a second, I tweeted at the start of the second half, Texas A&M is about to win this game because there was no possible way they could have played as poorly in the second half as they did in the first. They couldn't shoot themselves in the foot in the first half because they had already blown both of their feet off. They played as poorly as a football team can play in the first half and won. Partly because they got their heads out of their own anuses, but also because South Carolina kind of put theirs in their own. So it's not just the 27-point collapse against the number 3 team in the country on the road yesterday. There's way more to it than that. South Carolina finishes the season at 1-7 in the SEC. The only win they get is against a Kentucky squad that is also probably should be discussing firing their coach, to tell you the truth, but that's a different discussion for a different day. 1-7 in the SEC. Coming into the season, South Carolina was one of those dark horse college football playoff favorites. And I made this equation to start the season that every year in fantasy football, there is a running back that had a big end of the season the year before. And everybody is like, oh, the number 1 overall player that you have to pick in your fantasy football draft is this running back who did great work at the end of last season. He's poised to have a big year. You've got to draft him 1 overall. And then inevitably, that guy either sucks or gets hurt. And everybody who took them first overall feels as if they wasted their first overall pick because that person was overhyped. That player just was never going to live up to the stature that so many people had pegged them as. And I thought that was South Carolina coming into the college football season. That there were a lot of people saying, this was the hottest team in college football to end the 2024 season. They've got Lenora Sellers. How are they not going to make the college football playoff? And I was like, I pump the brakes because I don't think they're that good. I think they have 2 things going for them. They have Lenora Sellers, and they have a patch that says SEC on it. Those are the only 2 reasons why you would think that they would make the college football playoff. And here we sit at the end of their conference slate. They're 1-7, where they lost 7 straight. And you are now maybe 6 straight. Nonetheless, it's a lot of L's right in a row down the South Carolina schedule. Exacerbated with the cherry on top that you blow a 27-point lead on the road against one of the top 3 teams in the country. It's something that had never been done before in conference history. And not one of the good ways something had never been done before. One of the bad ways that something that had not been done in 286 tries, South Carolina was able to pull off. And Shane Beamer is still the head coach this morning. Still the head coach this afternoon. I can't, in an era where we now live in the college football world, and maybe, I'll get to this in a second, where everybody is throwing millions of dollars, just fat stacks of cash at their coaches to say, we don't want you anymore. To prove how invested they are in the college football space, The fact that you can be a top 15 ranked preseason team, finish 1-7 in your league, blow a 27-point lead on the road where you don't score a damn point in the second half, feels kind of like the perfect storm to get your ass canned. Because 2 months ago, the worry was that Shane Beamer was going to leave for a better job or go back home to Virginia Tech. And now you have to figure out, well, how much do we owe this guy if we're going to can him? That's a perfect storm to getting fired. And yet, furthermore, he's doing it with a quarterback who very easily could be the number 1 overall pick in either this year's draft or next year's draft. So you couple all of that together, complete and utter ineptitude, with what is definitely going to be a first-round pick, potentially the number 1 overall pick, either in 2026 or in the 2027 NFL draft if Lenore Sellers comes back to college. And there are a lot of NFL scouts that are saying, like, yes, he should go back to college, get even more experience. Whether that's going to be in South Carolina, at some point in December, probably, there will be a podcast episode of, like, why Lenore Sellers is the biggest free agent in college football history. But you go 1-7 in the league, 4 wins. You're not going to a bowl game after being a top 15 ranked team. You blow a 27-point lead on the road against the top 3 team in the country with a first round or first overall NFL draft pick at the most important position in the sport. I think that's really, really, really difficult to explain away from Shane Beamer's perspective. I don't know what you say that makes people go, oh, yeah, I guess it does make a little bit of sense, because it doesn't really. The argument being, like, even if the argument was, well, we ran the gauntlet in the SEC schedule where they had to play Vanderbilt and Missouri and Ole Miss, doesn't really pass this, because you're just admitting at that point that half the league is better than you are. Not a great defense when you're trying to keep your job. But I think maybe the 2 saving graces for why Shane Beamer ain't fired today is, 1, the $28 million buyout. And I'm guessing somebody, it's not $28 million, it's 27.8. Yeah, we'll round up, okay? $28 million is not an insignificant amount of money. That's not, like, that's a lot of cash to fire somebody. So I get it. I think the bigger saving grace is that if South Carolina were to fire their coach, if Shane Beamer were to be canned, where do the Gamecocks register on the list of jobs that are open right now or are potentially going to come open? Because the answer, I promise you, Gamecock fans don't want to have to confront, because it ain't above Auburn. It ain't above Arkansas. It's not above Florida State. It's not above Penn State. Is it above Stanford? You could make the case that the answer is no. The reason I think that Shane Beamer is still the head coach of the South Carolina Gamecocks is the buyout, and you're going to be 10th in line in the pecking order and hierarchy of coaches. In the up-and-comers is John Sumrall at Tulane going to pick South Carolina over LSU or Auburn or Arkansas? No. Is Eric Morris at North Texas going to make that decision? Going to choose South Carolina over these other schools? No. Over Florida? No. Is an established head coach at a different program going to leave their job to come to South Carolina? Probably not. Are you going to go back to the well of SEC position coach or coordinator? Didn't really work for you at this stage if we're talking about Shane Beamer getting fired and Shane Beamer's best season being a 9-4 going to the Citrus Bowl. If that's the ceiling, South Carolina probably should be okay with that. But it has to consistently be in that realm, not going to a bowl game with a first overall selection at the quarterback spot. I think the reason Shane Beamer is still the head coach is because South Carolina is not a real attractive job compared to the Florida LSU, Auburn, Penn State, Virginia Tech, Stanford, UCLA, Oklahoma State's over the world. Now, is it in that camp with Oklahoma State, UCLA, Stanford, Virginia Tech? Yeah, it is. But it is not, and I would caution anybody to try to make the argument that it is in the same realm as the Auburn, LSU, Florida, Penn State. It's not. And that's kind of its saving grace at this point, to tell you the truth. Shane Beamer should send a fruit basket to Brian Kelly and Billy Napier, James Franklin, for being inept. Because if they weren't, I think he's got a pink slip this morning. But maybe that's a little too jumping the gun. Maybe it's a little too early to argue that Shane Beamer should be fired. You go 1-7 in the league after being a top 15 ranked team in the preseason with a first-round quarterback, and you have the chance to spoil Texas A&M's undefeated season because you're kicking their ass at halftime and you can't put a point on the board to win a game. That feels like a hell of a situation to find yourself in when when the Grim Reaper's walking around to SEC football offices just checking to see who's in their office and whether or not they've got time to meet real quick. I don't know how Shane Beamer went to sleep last night, to tell you the truth, because boy howdy, that was as bad a loss as you'll ever see at the end of a conference schedule that went as poorly as you can probably ever really see in modern day SEC football. That's not a great recipe for keeping your job. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you know the great college football content we're pumping out. If you are listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle.